The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's Brian for Breaking Down Security. This week is our second part of our discussion with Alyssa Miller and April Wright on IoT security. This week is a discussion of IoT ecosystems and standards and things that, for those of you who do IoT hacking, probably is not very exciting. But for a lot of us who have to deal with security from a blue team side or from a management side, or, why is products management thinking the way they're thinking? A lot of, what they're trying to do is to be competitive and to try to gain acceptance. So, they may make kind of, leeway for certain types of devices or certain companies because of the clout that they have. This gave rise, obviously to where, not everybody's playing in the same playing field. And that causes additional issues where you've got some devices that may do one thing and another device that may not do anything. So, we talk about standards being what they are because they level the playing field. They take out a lot of competition potentially, but they also make sure that it's easier to secure across the whole network. It's funny, the Olympics are on in Beijing right now. And just as an example, they were talking about the bobsled competition, and we were watching the bobsledders, and they said, for a while there were a lot of countries that did not have the budgets to be able to buy a Boeing or a Lockheed Martin or an aerospace company to be able to build a better bobsled. So I don't know when they did it. They mentioned that they decided to standardize on one model, and that made it a lot easier for them, for a lot of other countries to gain adoption and to get involved in bobsledding. So you see New Zealand, or you see, Jamaica in this case, had a very famous bobsledding team. But it's the standardization that actually helped make a better environment for them. So, what we talk about this week is those ecosystems out there and why standards are important, why maintaining a standard level of security and privacy across your environment is good, and, what you should be thinking about if you're working in environments or ecosystems that maybe aren't keeping the same standards for everybody or treats, one type of device differently from another. So, hope you gain some insight into that, and enjoy our interview. So hope you have a great week. And here's part two. Right. Yeah. So one of the other things that went in my research here for the show, and there's a lot of stuff on here. I'll probably have to get rid of some of the questions because it won't make a lot of sense in this context, but there's the rise of IoT ecosystems, and, we're thinking of things like tracking your dog and stuff, but there are a number of IoT podcasts out there. If you want to actually, stay abreast of IoT related items, there's a weekly podcast or two out there that just talk about IoT systems. And there's a number of things out there, like Epson is coming out with a print IoT ecosystem. There are open source ecosystem platforms where you can put those out. One of them, the best well-known I think I saw on that one, was Arduino. Arduino has an IoT open source platform. All of these various IoT platforms, and I think Amazon, of course, just came out with Sidewalk, which, as I heard, blew up the internet. Twitter's pretty good. With all of these competing platforms and need to get to market, and all these devices are going to be connecting to multiple places, what should we have in the way of standards? It seems like there should be some standards on how devices should work. AirTags should beacon out on any phone platform, or whatever, if Google comes out with an IoT device, everything should work along the same lines in terms of notifying people if they're in range. I mean, so just to open it up to everybody, what are some of the things that should be standardized across IoT devices? And, keeping in mind things like CPU and processor power and lifetime of battery and stuff. But I mean, there must be a handful of things that we could put on these devices to make them safer for people, if they're not being used correctly.
So the reason that question is hard to answer is because the technology is constantly evolving, and it's hard to really plan for what that technology is going to be to say, here's the standard for it, right? I mean, these BLE trackers that everybody, we're talking about today, like, a couple of years ago, that wasn't really a thing that we would have thought about we need a standard for. You don't know you need a standard until something's created. So I think you have to elevate it a bit, but I'm going to go back to what I was saying before. My personal opinion is if there was any one standard I was going to call for, it would, and I'm not, as somebody who works in a hugely regulated industry, believe me calling for regulations is not, something that happens very often. But if I was going to pick one thing, it would be the requirement to have that form of threat model. I don't, some standard, process or something that needs to be followed with standard communication out to consumers, where consumers know how they can find that information out. Because I don't know many companies are going to do that voluntarily. But if they all know each other's doing it, suddenly now it's not that concern to their marketing. In fact, now reducing that threat model could become actually, a competitive advantage. Wouldn't that be nice? So that would be the one thing I'd be hoping for.
Yeah. April?
At this point, I would just be happy. I'm just going to be pragmatic about it. Like, yeah, I mean, that would be awesome. I would be happy if the IoT devices and ecosystems were just maybe use, I like the ecosystem idea, and maybe this will pair well with it, but I like the ecosystem idea because it's got a centralized set of libraries that you can use when you're developing IoT applications and firmwares and things like that. I like the idea of having a centralized code base of tried and true, updated in one place instead of 100, and this goes back to Log4j. Updated in one library, and it cascades to 1 million devices. Like, how great would that be? Just one change.
So,
of course,
you want to
be really careful with integrity of that code as well. But
right, yeah, you want to know an SDK one SDK that everybody uses.
It's so much easier, and it makes it so that the IoT developers don't have to anything that we can make it so that they don't have to think about security, so that they just do it and it's secure, and they don't have to worry about it. They don't have to pay extra for security. They don't have to. It's all just there. That would be ideal. I think that's the closest to ideal we can ever get.
Yeah, and that some of the reasons I brought up the open source stuff is we're quickly going to move into where we're going to have Log4j on IoT devices, or we're going to have, the next, massive dependency in an SDK that, a company will send out their SDK. The third party will be, using, version 1, and we're, the latest version is 3.5. They've been mandated to use the latest versions, but, what's the company going to do, especially from a third party provider? Because all of these companies are going to want to integrate with third parties. So, your Googles are going to want, Samsung's going to give them $100 million and, the check clears. So here's the SDK, go with God. And then Samsung's going to be like, well, we don't want to implement these security things. And then Google's going to be like, yeah, we're not going to let you play in our network. And then they're like, well, we already have 100 million devices on your network. So tell your customers that they're going to be impacted by this. There's definitely an image problem here where I think a lot of these big organizations with these ecosystems are not going to be able to enforce security on the end devices. So their ecosystem is going to get polluted fairly quickly because the third parties are going to call the bluff of the Amazons or the Microsofts or the Googles of the world and say, no, you can't be on our ecosystem. And Samsung will be like, we already paid you. So yeah, we're going to be on it. So I worry about the ability for ecosystem creators to enforce security on the end devices?
Yeah, I'm sitting here laughing because I'm just thinking there's a whole lot of people in healthcare devices right now saying, hey, welcome to our world for the last 10 years. Because that's a problem, right? I mean, how many open source devices are out there with open source software on them that updates come, but they don't get updated because it's a pacemaker in somebody's chest, for God's sake. Now we're getting better, right? I mean, now there are over-the-air updates for pacemakers, but even that's been kind of a bit of a shit show, as they've sort of evolved that. I can think back to our old friend, God rest his soul, Barnaby Jack, and a lot of the stuff that he was finding, 10 years ago. We've come a long way, but I mean that is the challenge when we're talking IoT. Whether it's medical device or anything else, we're talking about physical things that you're not necessarily going to have access to be able to update them. And that makes for a very significant challenge. And a lot of these makers right now, so maybe that's the standard you need, is most of these IoT devices have some app somewhere, there's some user interface, they need to be updatable through that. So if I've got, God forbid, an IoT candle, stupidest idea ever. I've got an app to control that candle. It damn well better be able to update that candle. Yes, this was actually a thing on Kickstarter. I think it died because people realized it was a really bad idea to light candles remotely. But yeah, I mean, and I'm not picking on the candle people. It was kind of a neat idea. But,
I will. Yeah, no open flames. Yeah. But you hear those jokes about on Twitter. It's like, oh, my light won't turn on because there's a firmware update in progress or something like that. And it's like, I'm automatically pushing updates, which is great until I'm ripping out my Google Mesh Wi-Fi right now in my house. I think I tweeted it out because it was like, it worked great 8 months ago. But when I have a phone made by the same damn company and it's getting 6 megabits on a gigabit Ethernet connection or a gigabit Wi-Fi connection. And I'm like, it won't work anymore. And I'm ripping it out because, I have to reboot my phone to get a Wi-Fi signal on the damn thing, or, it's just not as fast as it used to be. And I don't want to blame obsolescence, but, you would think it would still work at the same level it always has. There's a patch that got pushed out that it just didn't like, or, there's a ghost in the shell. Hopefully it's not a shell, but there's a ghost in the machine there that, is causing the performance to go down. So I ripped it out and put in a TP-Link Archer router in. But, you mentioned a mobile app there. We've got, you've got gateways, because in our link there, I've linked to several discussions about how various architecture works. But there's gateways, you've got devices, gateways, then you've got the infrastructure in the background for things like registering and deregistering. You have SDKs, you have mobile app devices. One of the things that people were asking about with Tile and those is how are we going to detect tiles when they come out? And somebody was like, well, you just download this app. And they're like, but it's 100 megabytes for the app to download, and people are like, why should I have to download a 100 megabyte app and create an account? And, if I don't have an Amazon account, or I don't have a Ring account or whatever, why do I need to do all of that just to find out if a tile is or is not tracking me? And what happens if I don't do that? Am I actually going to be able to detect those things? There's a lot there, and one of the things we were talking with Litmoose, I was under the mistaken impression that, in terms of like when domestic violence occurs or what have you, people tend to leave their old life behind, which means their technology and all of their stuff, because phones can be tracked, cars can be tracked if done correctly. And I have a Tesla, so yes, it can definitely be tracked. But, the new technology you get may not support the ability to do those things. You may get a new phone, but it may not be an iPhone 13. It may not be a Google, Pixel Pro 6 or whatever. You may not be able to actually do the scans for those things. You may be running on an Android 7 phone or something that's pay as you go or something like that. So we need to find better ways of making these safer and still benefit from what they had intended them to do. There was a question there at some point. I just don't remember what it was. Mr. Betcher, you've been a little quiet. So do you have a lot of IoT devices in your house? I don't know.
Not
You
too
live in
many.
what is your most complex IoT device? Do you have a light?
I don't know. A DVR, is that an IoT?
Oh my God.
I mean, maybe. Well, my concern all along has been, okay, so how long is this thing going to be updated by the company? You know, I have the pacemaker. Is that good for 40 years? Or
Right.
or are they going to have to like get a new pacemaker just because there are no more security updates by that company? When I had a phone, it no longer got security updates after a time, or any updates
Right.
for that matter.
Right.
It was still perfectly usable, but you know, how long could I go without an update? So I said, well, let me go get a Google Pixel, because surely Google will update their own phones. They own Android, right? So I got a Google Pixel, whatever, maybe it was the first version or a second version, Google Pixel 2. And all of a sudden, a few months ago, they said, okay, we're not updating this anymore. So that
Right.
was
2 years.
a surprise to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. The Pixel 6 is the first one that has long-term, like I think they said 5 years for updates on the Pixel 6, but yeah, Pixel 5s after 2 years, you're not going to get updates anymore. Which is kind of sad. And I mean, that is pretty much planned obsolescence. No more security updates after,
yeah.
X number of years.
I mean, that's almost worse than what Apple did when their first few phones came out. They would stealthily make it slower and slower until you just couldn't stand it anymore, and you'd buy a new one.
That's true. That's true. Well, I mean, for AirTags, like April's got there, I mean, as long as you keep putting new batteries in it, it'll work. I mean, however long that is, but I mean, at some point, the ecosystem and the culture of buying into Apple or buying into Google is always to buy the new hotness. I got $600 off of my Pixel 6 because I traded in my Pixel 5, factory reset, of course. So I mean, there's just a lot to unpack here with regards to various things. April, you've dealt with a lot of privacy issues. What kind of worries should people who use these IoT devices worry about with regards to data? I know that when Sidewalk came out and was announced in the white paper, which is in the show notes, the publicly accessible white paper came out, and people found out, well, it's opt out, so you're automatically signed up, woohoo. And you'll be sharing data with your neighbor, neighbors. In this case, I have more than one neighbors, to help them find their lost dogs or their lost keys. And you can, if you have a Ring device or an Echo device that is what they consider to be a gateway, which is one of those cameras, up to 500 megabytes of data from your own, cache of ISP data is used to send messages or track lost items, or if you lose internet, then your neighbor will pick up the load. And to which I have to ask myself, if everybody has the same ISP in the area and you lose internet connectivity, is that are you shit out of luck anyway? But why should we be worried about things like Sidewalk sharing that information with people? Is there a reason? Is it unfounded? Am I just being too paranoid here?
I don't think that sharing any one piece of data is the end of the world. I think that it's the aggregate of all of the data that's available for us. It's the OPM breach combined with the Equifax breach combined with the healthcare breach, and all of that together is what makes it all valuable. So this, in the scheme of things, when we still have outages, power outages, and people attacking our infrastructure, like this seems like such a minor thing to people, right? But when you add in the malicious intent that so many people seem to have, I mean, I think that it is a valid concern for anybody. I mean, you could, there are, I don't even want to give people ideas, but like you could use these for all kinds of nefarious purposes. Maybe not even tracking a person, but tracking a process or a package or something. Let's say that you mail something to a celebrity and it's got a tag in it and it ends up in their office or their house or whatever. I mean, there's so many different things so many different vectors that you can take. The ecosystem thing weirds me out because then you're sharing, in theory, you could, let's say we look at it from like a Hack5 pineapple perspective. So let's say that I have a Ring device and that's acting as a gateway for other devices. If I were to intercept that traffic, could I see what other people are doing or sending, or like what would that look like? That would be something I'd be really interested in, because if you could set up a person in the middle with certificates to decrypt and recrypt, I mean, that would be, that's certainly a valid attack vector. And if you're getting stuff from, I mean, I live in a big city. I've never gotten alerts for other AirTags, but so I mean, I think it's tuned to some degree.
Okay.
It's just, I mean, it's such a slippery slope. And when we talk about privacy things, like, yeah, okay, these are cool and it's not that big of a deal, but the misuse cases, I think, is something that was not properly addressed. I think that we're seeing that. I think they're seeing that as well.
Right. Alyssa, any thoughts there?
I mean, I think the most dangerous part of the whole thing is just the general public's apathy toward the whole thing. Like, I mean, people don't care about their own privacy anymore, because how many times have you heard somebody just throw up their hands and say, yeah, they already know everything about me anyway? Or what do I care? There's nothing that they don't already know. Or, I mean, I've heard a million different things. And I think that's the scariest part, because you'll hear people get upset when they find out about the latest horrible thing that Facebook did with privacy, or, you see InfoSec get all up in arms about, something as hideous as the whole automatic opt-in to Sidewalk, which, by the way, I can't even find the Sidewalk setting in the Alexa app anymore, but that's another story. But yeah, I mean, just we've gotten to this point, and it's gold mine for the vendors, because great, no one cares about privacy anymore. Well, wonderful. I mean, Facebook proved that it doesn't matter, because you look at what happened back in 2018 with the Cambridge Analytica stuff. Facebook was riding high in this wave of consumer trust. They had like 78% consumer trust score. And then all of a sudden, Cambridge Analytica, their trust drops. But you know what didn't drop? Their user base. I mean, they saw some. There was some drop, but clearly not enough to impact them. I mean, they're now becoming Meta. Sorry, a little snarky, but but seriously, I mean, it didn't ruin them. So clearly people don't care.
Right. Is it an image thing? Is it like, oh no, what is Amazon going to do with our data again? I mean, there's been numerous stories. I think one in the last couple of months from Apple. It was like, Apple cares about your privacy as long as you're not an employee. I think we mentioned that on one of the shows, is that where it's like, guy started working there. He was like, great, I'm working at Apple. It's dream job or whatever. And then they're like, yeah, we want access to your, personal, social media accounts or whatever. And, or, he was terminated and they said, don't wipe your machine. And he was like, well, I've got all my personal stuff on here, including home and mortgage stuff. And they're like, yeah, don't do that. And, is it an image problem? It's like, okay, Amazon's got this brand new thing, or Google's got this brand new thing. And you're like, okay, how can they use that for evil? It's ironic because, Google's do not be evil, but, that's sailed, but.
That was Google before Alphabet.
Right. Is it an image thing? Is it a, oh no, or is it just that us security people are so jaded because we've seen a ton of issues with this? And I'm remembering a couple of HushCons ago where there was a talk about cable tap, which is actually, I believe, Comcast put out with their home appliances a way for people to share that internet connectivity through what's called Xfinity Wi-Fi. And some security researchers found out that maybe the network segmentation between the public Wi-Fi access point and the personal Wi-Fi access points were not necessarily 100% isolated. There was a big, ugly hush job on that. There was potentially some VC money trying to be thrown around or what have you, but that research was squashed. And I believe if you look up cable tap, I don't know if it was actually recorded anywhere, but I did see that talk at HushCon. I believe it was also given at DEF CON or Black Hat. In some form or fashion, but it did cost somebody a job, I believe. But I think with those kinds of things where people are trying to build these networks, they don't, those are some things when they're architecting the environment that they don't necessarily think about. And then you end up with a cable tap where, somebody can connect to, which is why to this day, I still don't use the Comcast appliance that they have supplied everybody with. I bought my own surfboard modem. I guess that brings me to my last point before we go. As security professionals, if we work for companies that make this kind of stuff, should we be dog fooding this stuff? I mean, I don't own IoT devices. If I worked for Tesla, obviously I have a Tesla car, but if Google came out with something and I worked at Google, should I be dog fooding that stuff? Or am I wrong for not wanting to dog food that stuff?
I would absolutely be dog fooding it if I worked for the company. Even companies themselves should be dog fooding their own stuff. And if they're not, they're silly.
Right. I'm sure they do. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm laughing at the statement of working for a company on these products. Say you're working on Alexa and then not being willing to use the product. That's a pretty good indication right there that that's probably not something that's market worthy. Honestly though, it's why I use a lot of the stuff that I have in my home. I've exposed at this point that I do have an Alexa. And yeah, a lot of it is because I want to understand this stuff. I want to be able to tell my parents when they go out and buy one for themselves, how do they secure it, or how do I tell my sisters and how they secure their stuff. So, look at how many security researchers do that kind of thing. I think that is, but yeah, organizations should be too. Heck, Harley Davidson does it. You go work at Harley Davidson, they want you to buy a Harley. They give you huge discounts and everything else. A friend of mine works for the company that owns Weber Grills, and one of the first things they did was he got to go buy, they gave him a credit to go buy a Weber grill so he could use it and be able to speak about it. That's, that should absolutely be the part of any organization.
Okay. Yep. That is a fair point. There are exceptions to that rule. If you don't have diabetes, but you work for a company like Dexcom, you're not going to be using the constant glucose monitoring thing. You could, but I don't know to what end that would be. But so as a security professional who works at those companies, what would be would you want to be trying to break it, or is it just like using it in normal fashion as a typical user would? Is there hacking that should be done? Should you be like, yes, I want to poke around inside of this? Or, if they give you homework, should you be, volunteering to, use those extra couple hours a week to do so? What's the level of effort here? There must be a bare minimum on this.
So as a mature organization should have a program that involves going in and poking around at things and trying to find problems. Unfortunately, that is not the way most problems are found, especially if you're just trying to do like a QA type of thing with steps.
Right.
I find way too many problems and things all the time just poking around to see what things do. I don't intend to, and it gives me a lot of extra work to try to fix them, because once I find it, I end up owning it. But I mean, yes, if you're not using it both in normal ways and occasionally in extraordinary ways, then you're not going to find things that you can either make as suggestions to the company, to where, especially if you're a large company and you have any kind of sway, or you have a large contract or something, you know, that you can ask them to roadmap things if you find a problem, if you find a gap somewhere, if you I mean, I am constantly submitting things like there was a SaaS tool, it was like a productivity tool, and they had they needed something changed, and it was like a default public profile picture, and I was like, why would you make it default public? And so just open a little ticket, send it off to the vendor. I mean, those little things, like, those add up, and somebody has to be looking out for these things, because if I don't do it, I don't know who will. So that's why I do it.
That is a fair point. Yeah, I can see the need to definitely want to. I guess you don't necessarily have to believe in the product, but, you know, making sure that it's as secure as you can possibly make it, you know, by having yet another, you know, having a hacker mindset, or having a security, or even a user experience mindset, I guess would make the most sense there. So
I find myself improving other people's products for free. Like, while I'm working at this one company, and I'm working with, you know, we're using this other software, and their product ends up being better because we were working on that level.
That's cool. Okay. Mr. Betcher, we're at the top of the hour. Well, at the top of the hour. Is there anything you'd like to ask or make comments on before we go? And then I'll ask April and Alyssa.
No.
So you're going to go and get some IoT devices and test them with me?
Way more. Yeah.
Way more being 100% more. So you'll get one, you know? So.
Yes.
Okay.
Infinity more, from 0 to 1.
Okay. Very nice. Okay. April, any last thoughts? And then we'll go to Alyssa.
Oh gosh. I don't know. I think everybody's personal threat model is probably worse than they think it is. There are probably people after you, even if you don't realize it. A lot of, especially as security professionals, we have a lot of access. We know a lot of things. We know a lot of problems, vulnerabilities, things like that. We talk about the insider risk involved in people writing code and you know, throwing their code in the fire before they leave. I don't know. This is also complex. Like, privacy is such a complex, shifting issue, and it is not something that we're going to solve here even in this year. I don't think. I mean, this is going to be something we'll be talking about forever.
Okay, cool.
We'll be in
Alyssa, yeah, there you go. Alyssa.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, as security and privacy professionals, if we really want to improve this world and we want to make this thing better, we need to find ways to monetize consumer trust, right? I think, honestly, I think we've let that erode, and because we've found business models that make money off of activities that erode that consumer trust. So I think the best thing you can do if you work in this space is start looking for ways that your organizations can monetize activities that build consumer trust. And, you know, I really believe that's the long-term answer, because I mean, it sounds cynical to some people, but the reality, of course, is business is driven by market. It's driven by innovation. It's driven by what's going to create revenue. So find a way to monetize that. And I think we would go a long way toward improving our privacy posture and honestly eliminate some of these things that we as security and privacy professionals, boy, tough talking tonight, improve some of these things that we look at and we get so frustrated with.
Cool. Yeah. That sounds like a whole nother show, how to, build trust or how to monetize that. I'm going to put that down. We will come back to you or next, sometime this year. I want to have you back on to talk about that, because it does sound like a lot of companies have that image issue, and that they need to figure out how to make it better. So that would be something we could definitely talk about, I think, from that point of view. So I thank you both for coming tonight. I want to start with April. How would people, let's say, they found this podcast illuminating and would love to talk with you more about that? How would they find you online?
I'm on Twitter as April Wright or architectsecurity.org.
Architectsecurity.org. Okay. Alyssa, how about yourself?
Easiest by far, Twitter as well. Alyssa M_infosec. And that's with a Y, people. Tell DNS Princess she spells it wrong.
I tell that to Mr. Betcher. He spells Brian wrong.
But otherwise, yeah, my website, AlyssaSec, ALYSSASEC.com. Or, you can find me on LinkedIn, of course, too, if you'd rather go that route. Okay,
sounds great. So, Mr. Betcher, I want to use this as outro for future podcasts. So I'm going to get a clean copy of this. Tell everybody about where people can find you online.
You can reach me at BetcherPwned on Twitter, BOETTCHERPWNED, or log-md.com.
Excellent. Thank you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that out later and add it to, Miss Berlin will create one. Sorry, it's a little behind the scenes for y'all folks. All right. So, yeah, we're all over the place. Mr. Betcher is on Twitter. The podcast is on Twitter at Breaksec, BRAKESEC. You can follow me on Twitter as well, BRYANBRAKE, Brian Brake. InfoSister, you can find her at INFOSYSTIR, InfoSister. That's Miss Berlin. She also does a lot of work to promote mental health issues, and sorry, she doesn't promote them, but she promotes awareness about mental health issues to the larger InfoSec community. You can find her organization at Hackers Health, and she also does a tabletop thing for companies. So if you're trying to do IR tabletops in a bent, much like Clerics and Catacombs, or those kinds of role-playing games, like a tabletop role-playing game, which are very much in vogue now, you can go find out more information about that at InfoSec Roleplay on Twitter, ROLEPLAY. And I'd like to thank all of our supporters on Patreon who donate a little money to the tip jar every month for hosting fees, Zoom fees, paying for Libsyn. I just re-registered breakingsecurity.com and breakingsecurity.com, just in case somebody spells breaking security wrong. Got to make sure I don't get typo squatted or anything like that. So had to buy both domains. Yeah, keep an eye out on our website. We're going to be putting out some new content with a friend of ours. Her name's Wimry. We managed to, we were doing some stuff with PonySec a bit ago. Pony has kind of passed the torch in that respect, because we turned him from a house painter to a bug bounty hunter to a pen tester for an ISP. So that's, job well done for us, I think. But Wimry is getting into InfoSec and AppSec, and she's going to be creating some videos for us soon. And we're just creating the cards and trying to get some of that up. So she'll be going through like the Portswigger lessons and some of the advent calendars that came out just recently. And we'll be putting up some vignettes and stuff on our Breaksec YouTube page. So keep an eye out for that. All right. I think that was everything. So hope everyone, April, Alyssa, I know y'all were supposed to probably go to ShmooCon, and that got not canceled, but moved to a later date. So I hope people will be able to see you all at that very soon. Either of you, Alyssa, are you still doing your Friday parties?
Yep, Fancy Fridays every week. So
Okay.
we are still out there doing our Friday night meetups, and
Okay.
apparently I look back on every week since April 2020. We have not missed
That's
a week
awesome.
yet. Knock on wood.
That's awesome. Okay. You can follow Alyssa if you want to, keep track of those, if you want to join, and, don't be like our CSEC East meetup where we actually had a Zoom bomber the other day. I made the horrible mistake of posting the link, but fortunately the person was a hacker, and we've actually invited him to come and speak at our next conference because he was nice about being the Zoom bomber. So that was kind of cool. We turned a negative into a positive. So, yeah, it was weird like that.
Do crimes nicely.
Yeah. I mean, he came on, he made some voiceover things and some ha-has, and he posted on the chat, hey, kind of ironic, this is a security meetup, and you posted the link publicly on Twitter. And I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. I should have put the meetup link so you could have RSVP'd and got the link that way. But yeah, so we're gonna see about having that person come on and talking. He's a red team member at a company. So, but anyway, thank you both for coming on, taking the time, and I appreciate it. And that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. Have a great week. Be kind to one another. Get your vaccinations. Wash your hands, you damn nasties. Mask up, and hopefully we'll get through this Omicron. And if you've got Delta, get through the Delta together. And hope you have a good week, and we'll talk to you again soon.